Some whistling. I'm Ricky Camilleri. Welcome to Build. You know, in the wake of Donald Trump's election and events like Charlottesville, America has gone from post-racial, which was never really true, to very, very racial and racist. Writer, director, and actress Diarra Kilpatrick has been hilariously exploring America's race issues with her short-form comedy show on ABC, American KoKo. It tells the story of the Everybody's a Little Racist agency, headed by Kilpatrick's KoKo. Let's take a look.
Get the stuff? Of course I got the stuff. Detangling brush, moisturizing creams, all suited to your daughter's hair texture. You really should have learned about all of this before you adopted from Nigeria.
In post-racial America, problems of a distinctly racial nature are considered especially heinous. These sticky situations are handled by an elite team of problem solvers.
Chinese.
Jew. Black.
Super black.
And what do you do?
Oh, she's a race detective.
Awesome!
Check the pantry for the brand of syrup.
Aunt Jemima.
Shouldn't we lean into the uncomfortable moments?
Everyone's a little racist agency.
I have a race problem. I have written a stirring gospel musical about Harriet Tubman. I only have one black girl in my class. She thinks she should play Harriet.
That makes sense.
You haven't heard her sing.
Okay, wow.
My perfect guy is supposed to be thirdsies. Jay-Z, Chris Rock, Darius Love Hall.
Your official reason for not dating me is that I'm not black enough?
You flirting with me?
What? No. Yes. Asians are sick and tired of being the model minority. Those ninjas are wildin'.
Then you want me to be Jay-Z?
I'm supposed to win with my mind and my black girl magic.
Magical Negroes only exist in movies, Akosua.
What about the Obamas? I had an aggressive case of angry black woman syndrome.
So you're totally cured.
Uh-huh.
Really? You don't think that's a little extreme?
No.
Everybody, please welcome the incredibly talented Diarra Kilpatrick. Hey. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Do I even need this? Oh, I do.
You need it. First question, you know, the first season of this that you put out was in 2014, right? And the second one, was post-election, right? What was it like going from doing a show that was kind of initially about what I think some would consider microaggressions when it comes to race in this country, to a country that had been sort of divided among microaggressions across the country a lot of the time, to a country that was like actually talking about very big racial problems and a president that celebrated those racial problems in some respects?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true because in the beginning, that's why it was able to be a comedy, right? Because we were sort of like, we were toying with this idea that we were in post-racial America. Nobody believed that had a college degree, but people were toying with that idea, right? And so we were like, yeah, I thought it would be really funny to make a comedy about just, we integrated, right? But nobody gave us a guidebook. And I don't think that people are bad in any way, you know, but sometimes people don't know how to handle race-based conflicts because after slavery, and no one said this is how we're all going to come together and live and work together. So I thought that was really funny. But then after Trump was elected, it felt like, oh man, maybe it's just not redecorating the house in America. Maybe it's like we need to like go in and do some serious structural change. Like there's some issues in the structure of our house now. And so
we need some new foundation.
We need
to re-pour the concrete, rebuild the,
100%. And so I think it made the fact that it was still a comedy a lot harder for some people and maybe braver and edgier. I think you'll find that the second season feels a little tougher and packs a sort of a more substantial punch for that reason. But yeah, it just it really literally the series went from more of a broader comedy to more of like a ooh kind of comedy.
What was it like in that first season, sort of developing storylines about a lot of these sort of, I hate to keep using the phrase microaggressions because microaggressions to a lot of other people are not micro, they are macro in a lot of ways. But what was it like developing storylines along those and where did you hunt for them?
You know, it was just stuff that stuck out to me. You know, at the time I was working with a youth theater group and I just thought it was hilarious that the black girls couldn't sing. Like, I was like, what happened? Like, I grew up in Detroit when you saw a little black girl, especially if she was like a little bit chubby, you were like, "Ooh, she's gonna blow," you know. And then it was just like girl after girl couldn't sing, and I was finding that a lot of the Latin girls were really being able to sing, and I was like, "That's interesting and that's funny," and that's sort of where that storyline came from. In the first season is the black girl who can't sing, and yet she still wants to be cast as Harriet Tubman in the musical. And I thought that was an interesting question. You know, it wasn't as simple as, well, she's black, of course she could do it, right? But she couldn't sing. So exploring that to me was an interesting thing to talk about in this particular time.
The second season, I think, dives into a bit more of your character's personal life. We actually get a fair amount more about her relationships outside of the agency. What made you start developing that storyline rather than sticking with a kind of like just a procedural element kind of per episode?
Well, you know what? The first season was something that I knew I was going to make on my own. So what you see here, this is with just a few more dollars that ABC gave us, but the first version was made for my own money for $3,000. So
first season was?
Yes.
For $3,000?
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. It was.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many episodes was that again?
6. It was largely what you see as the first season with a different intro. But we shot it, without very many lights, without really any glam. And so because I knew we were making it that way, I wrote what I knew that I could shoot. So largely most of it took place in an office and in her apartment, and maybe we'd steal some shots on the street. And then the second season, the world got bigger because I thought we would be able to afford to go to more locations. So it was really as simple as that. So for writers, if you want to make your own thing, they always say write something that you can shoot.
How did Viola Davis get involved? And she narrates the intro.
She narrates the intro. She's our executive producer. So these are my stomping grounds. I went to NYU, studied theater, was up and down these streets all the time. I just went to Cozy Soup and Burger and got some eggs this morning, which is where my husband and I had our first rendezvous.
Was it a date or was it a rendezvous?
It was a rendezvous. No, it was like one of those nights where everyone's hanging out and then it turns out that you get like really close with one person, and you're like canoodling with one person and you realize it might be a thing.
Like in college, so it's like 3 a.m. and you're having like deep conversations that
100%.
You would actually pay to not have at our age now.
Yes. So I say all that to say I'm a theater person. And so I did a play when I first got to LA with Julius Tennant, who is Viola's husband. And Julius was like, "You have to meet my wife. She's so great." And then she showed up to the theater and I'm like, "That's Viola Davis. Yes, she is great." So we met.
Pretty normal. I mean, like she's a pretty down to earth.
Yeah.
When I interviewed her, I noticed that she did not really want to talk about movies or entertainment at all. She wanted to talk about like her family.
Yeah. She's definitely like the auntie that you always wanted, or, if you had great aunties, the auntie that you have. But she is great and very down to earth. And so we did that play together. So they were very kind. Sometimes they would invite me and my husband over for like Thanksgiving or whatever. So we stayed in touch. And then when we finished making the first version of this, I just sent it to everybody I had ever met. And
you got to do.
Yeah. And Julius and Viola called and said, "How can we be a part of this? This is really good. What do you want to do next?" And so they came on board at that time as EPs.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And now, is it since then that you've started writing on other shows as well? Was this kind of your gateway into writing, becoming a staff writer on other shows?
Yes. So the first show that I wrote on was called Mysteries of Laura, and they watched the $3,000 version of this and hired me on that show. And I wrote there, and then I've done the 2 seasons of Last OG, and I'm Dying Up Here. And then I've also developed 2 pilots for myself, one for FX and one for Amazon.
So you're a real writer now. Like, were you a real writer before, or did you write to be able to perform and then realize that you're a great writer and you love writing and now you do that? I mean, you act as well, but,
Yeah, it's more of that. I wrote a little bit. I did a one-woman show in that building right over there.
What was the one-woman show?
It was called The Devil is Beating His Wife, which sounds really intense. Like, this guy was like, yikes. But really, all it means is anybody from the Midwest? Do you know what it means? No. Okay. It's just a saying when the sun is shining and it's raining at the same time. That's all it is.
What a weird saying.
It's a weird, but my dad would say it all the time. You know, it's raining, the sun is shining, and he's like, he's really wearing her out. That was his. That's a saying. It happens in Detroit. I know, it's so inappropriate.
Yeah, I feel like if anyone said that now, you'd be like, hey, come on, I don't want to talk about domestic violence right now.
She should be beating him, too. It's like,
let it rain. Let's not.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother thing now, too, making it rain.
True, that is true.
But now we've ventured so far off. I'm like, where?
So you wrote your one-woman show.
Oh, right. So I wrote that and performed that at the Experimental Theater Wing at Tisch School of the Arts, NYU.
How long was it?
It was like 50 minutes.
Wow.
Or something. I don't think a one-person show should be longer than an hour. It's just torturous at that point. And so I did have that history of writing a little bit. And when I got to LA and I did have some success, but it wasn't enough for me, I started revisiting the writing idea of like, I want to star in something. I think, I'd be great in a show. So I was like, let me just write it. And so that is kind of how it started. And now it's really become a part of my identity as a writer-performer.
What is your writing process like? Are you the type of person who finds a project and then starts writing it? Or are you writing every day, like looking for a project to come out and then you focus on that project?
No, I'm sure my agents wish I was writing every day. My writing process is normally like, I cry a lot because I don't want to sit down and do it. I think a lot of writers kind of like to retreat from the world and get lost in this other world, and I don't.
I think you are with 90% of writers on that one. It's like 10% of writers who are like, I don't want to be near the world, I want to write, and the rest of them are like, how do I do this?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. So I cry a lot, and then I kind of feel like these stories have to harass me. Like if the stories harass me long enough, it'll get done. And so that was what happened with American KoKo. This idea kind of nagged me and harassed me, and that's what's happened with the feature that I'm writing right now. Is that it's just bothersome. It wants to be out in the world, and so I'm like, all right, fine.
What was it like when you first got into a writer's room? You started writing with other people.
It's different. It's interesting because I'm such an artist. Like I don't necessarily approach things as like, there's a lot of different things that come into writing, like a network show, like, is it appropriate, to be on at the 8 o'clock hour, stuff like that. I wasn't really coming at it from that way. It was just like whatever was inside of me was coming out. So it was really like stepping back from the muses and the romantic idea of writing, honestly, and like getting it done. Like network TV is a machine.
Give me all your ideas, churn and burn, right? Like
Yeah.
You get in the writer's room and you're just pitching ideas essentially to stay alive in there.
Yeah, it's not like SNL or something. It wasn't like that hostile of an environment where no one wants to unpack their offices or anything. But yeah, it is. You want to pitch. You want to get some ideas on the board, and you want to turn in a good script. It's just, it's much more like factory making artistry. Like someone described it as like making a sandwich at McDonald's. Like it's like the bun and the bread and the lettuce, and that's kind of how writing the story is. And then it kind of goes down the assembly line. That's what my experience in network TV was, for sure.
Right, you set up pitches for like the broad ideas of storylines, you build out the stories, and then you build out the beats in between. And essentially by the time you get a script to write for an episode, there's still a lot of work to be done, but a lot of it is sort of putting everybody else's ideas as well as yours into the buns.
100%. And you also can't be precious about it, because you could do that and you put your little stank on it or whatever, and then you get the note from the studio that's like, we don't want to do that. And so you just kind of have to change it. And coming from...
You put your voice in it and they're like, hey, what's that? Get that out of there.
Yeah, exactly. So it was that. It was much more of a gig. I think Last OG, because it's on cable and just came from a really strong point of view, that was a little bit more of an artistic endeavor.
It's also got Jordan Peele behind it, right?
Yeah.
Who's got a lot of, I think, weight to throw around right now after being nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's rightfully has a lot of weight to throw around. But like when something like that happens, sort of the doors get open for you a little bit.
Yeah, but this was even before, to be honest. Like, we were in the room for about a month before Get Out came out, and he was still throwing out very creative ideas and was starting the room with like, there are no rules. Like, let's sort of be disruptive with this. And so that was really exciting.
Do you feel like you could run a room if you had a show?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to say no to that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
That's amazing. What would be your sort of guiding principle in a writer's room if you were running it?
That's a good question. I think we're in a time now where we're throwing out a lot of the rules. You'll see a TV show and all the main characters won't even be in that episode, or it'll feel almost like a short film series sometimes, and that is a really exciting landscape to be in, where you aren't just making the same. You're not just placing the lettuce and this patty on the bun, right?
Like Atlanta, which went from like a first season that was like an incredible show about these characters, but really followed them along a sort of storyline throughout each episode, to the second season where it did feel like a series of short films about the characters.
Yeah, it's a vibe. It's almost like a concept album or something. And I think a lot of shows have felt like that. Master of None has felt like that. So that's really exciting, and I think it's important to be unbridled in that way. But I also would want to entertain too. That's always my thing. Like, American KoKo is about racism, but I dare you not to like get swept up in the romance and the comedy of it, So I like both of those ideas, to really entertain and to sort of challenge the viewer at the same time. And so I think that's a good place to start creatively.
Has there ever been a time on American KoKo where you wanted to address a specific subject but didn't feel like you had the right angle on it, or an entertaining angle on it, couldn't find the entertaining angle and sort of left it aside?
No, not
really.
No, I mean, we have 2 seasons up, so we haven't gone for like 12 seasons where I could say, oh yeah, I hit that challenge. But no.
So the funny thing comes to you first, rather than you finding a topic that you want to discuss and trying to find funny things around that.
American KoKo, I really felt like kind of open to the muses. Like, I couldn't really answer that question. It's just like, this is what it is, and it kind of came out on the page.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't give it too much forethought. I didn't even think of myself as a writer. I was like, let's get this done so we can make it. That's not the fun part. Sitting at the desk is not the fun part. So I was like, let's just get it done. And so a lot of people have asked me questions about process, and a lot of what I have to say is like, I was trying to hear a rhythm in my head with the dialogue. Since I'm an actor, dialogue is so important to me. And
what's the most important thing about dialogue for you?
That is interesting. I mean, I always find the poetry in the things that people say. Like, the guy who came and did my makeup this morning, like, there was just a rhythm and a cadence and a vibe to him that was so special and so poetic. And I don't even know if he would recognize that. He's just a Puerto Rican dude from the Bronx, who loves Beyonce. Like, I don't know that people would frame the things that he has to say in a way that highlights the poetry within it, And so I kind of enjoyed doing that. And August Wilson really did that. Quentin Tarantino does that. Who's my homie who I used to see walking down here?
They have an incredible way of talking around a scene. August Wilson and Quentin Tarantino. The scene is about something, but unlike so many other writers, they have this beautiful way of being able to talk around a scene for like 40 minutes. Yeah. Whereas everybody else is like, no, this is what the scene's about. Just get it done. An August Wilson play or a scene or a Quentin Tarantino scene is like, you're just so excited to see where the characters are going to go next, yet it's still very simplistic and has very kind of like one objective to get there. I find it fascinating.
Do you think this is the first time August Wilson and Quentin Tarantino have been mentioned in the same sentence?
I don't. I hope it's not.
I wonder, because they seem seemingly so different, but I do think that the way that they write is very similar for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue. I mean, that's how sort of great poets of dialogue generally write. Is that there's always more words to put into a scene, or more things to say within a scene, and it's always said well. Whereas, like, there are people who just sort of write great plot and don't have scenes like that. Right. Yeah. I don't know. I would hope. I don't want to be the first to put them together. Let's get some questions from our audience. Who has a question?
I have one. Hi, I'm Saren.
Hi. What'd you say?
Saren is my name. I'm curious about other like actress writers who might be like currently in your sphere of inspiration.
Yeah.
And like how they might affect your process.
Yeah, it's a good time for writer performers. So there's a ton. I remember, I think Tina Fey was like the first, and then Mindy Kaling and Issa and Donald and I was gonna say Dev, but his name, what's his real name? From Master of None.
Oh, Aziz.
Aziz Ansari. I am inspired by all of their work and am really excited that now. Oh, and also the Broad City Girls. They kill me. And I love them too because they're really going for comedy. Like we're in a very moody time of comedy, and they're just like it's in the title. Like they're going for it. So yeah, they're all. I guess the way that they influence my work is that they just kind of they've freed me up to think about things outside of the normal structure of television that we sort of all grew up with, that like sitcom, Saved by the Bell, you know, that very like that very kind of, I don't want to say stifling, but
stifling is fine for Saved by the Bell and those in Full House and like basically almost all of the sitcoms that we grew up with. Very stifling. There's like 3 sitcoms from the 90s that are really worth your time, and the rest are just like, oh God.
I don't know. They have this Saved by the Bell inspired restaurant in LA, and
Max?
The Max.
Is it there?
It is there.
Have you been?
Yes, I have.
What's that like?
It's amazing. Like my childhood self was like, yes.
Is there always a person sort of sitting around the chair like Slater, you know?
No, you can do that.
No.
but no, they don't have a guy there doing that. But
I want to walk in and call timeout and see if everybody freezes. That's what I want to do.
Yeah. That's funny that they had that one surreal aspect of Saved by the Bell. I forgot about that.
So weird and so like leftover Ferris Bueller.
He could stop time.
Yeah. And he would stop time and then go, I'm so sorry, we're going to do this right now, but he would stop time and then he would sometimes, you know, he would tell the audience everything that was happening and then he would just tell them like what his plan was that he was going to do. But sometimes he would like walk over and change the way people were facing to sort of completely change a scene around and affect the future. Why wouldn't he just be doing that all the time? He would never get into any problems.
Well, have you seen the show Zach Morris is Trash?
Yeah.
It is one of the funniest things on the planet.
It's such a weird thing that it exists, though, too.
But when you go back and look at it, you realize Zach Morris is trash. And he is sadistic, and he is the personification of white privilege, and he's kind of like a horrible person. And so it's just interesting to have that lens kind of flipped. I don't know why this interview has become about Zach Morris.
Well, he was trash, and so was Ferris Bueller. And I love Ferris Bueller, but Ferris Bueller was kind of trash as well.
Was Ferris Bueller trash? I have to go back and watch that one.
He just was the embodiment of white privilege. He had one thing that he had to do in his entire privileged life, which was go to school. And he couldn't do it, and he took everybody down with him that just wanted him to go to school.
Did his friend commit suicide, or he just had a tragic monologue?
He has a tragic monologue.
Okay,
he doesn't commit suicide.
Okay, good.
Unless maybe in a script that never got made, he was dead or something.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's like the Pretty Woman thing, where like the ending of Pretty Woman was like really tragic at first, and then Disney bought it and was like, we like the prostitute
What was
stuff.
the original ending?
I think her friend died of like a heroin overdose. You know, the Cinderella. I think she died of heroin overdose, and then I don't know. She went back to turning tricks, right? as what usually happens with prostitutes. Like I don't think that they're often swooped up into the Beverly Hills lifestyle.
Or it's brief, and then they're back.
And then they're back.
Yeah. Next question. Any other pop culture things you want us to unpack for you?
Hi. I was wondering how you think studying at NYU prepared you for working in the entertainment industry.
Oh, that's such a good question. For one, I felt like it really cemented my love for storytelling. as a performer, and as I did do some writing here and as a writer, and you need that in this business because so much of it is not about that. You know, I just had a meeting the other day that was like mostly about money, you know, it's like, and which is cool, you need it, you know, but at the same time, to do this job, you know, with the notes and the disappointments and the rejections, like that's one of my favorite hashtags right now is share your rejections because it can be a lot and they can mount. And I think.
Do you have a specific rejection you'd share?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. Like I've been in LA for almost 10 years. Like I'm trying to think of something like brutal, particularly brutal. But I mean, I've auditioned for a lot of things. I remember what this show like came and went, but I remember auditioning for Sleepy Hollow and being like, this is the one. This is going to be the one, Sleepy Hollow. And then it was like crickets. But yeah, that's happened a lot. And so I think you have to love it. And you have to know at the end of the day, it's about you putting your light into the world and like offering your light and shining bright so that people are attracted to you as opposed to like trying to be attracted to the business of Hollywood or whatever. And so that was something that I really learned here. Like I started out at Playwrights Horizons Theater School, and you could put up your own plays and then you had to tell them why you wanted to put up this show and why you think it needed to be in the world. And I think they just made us artists who really loved the kind of grit of it, because it will be more of that than like dress up in red carpets. Those are fun, but that's not the thing that will sustain you.
I think I have time for one more.
Yeah. Hi. Also, I just want to say I have seen the Zach Morris's Trash YouTube, and I think they're hysterical, and I totally agree with what you were saying. My question is, so obviously you made the first season yourself of American KoKo, and then when ABC came in, I assume since there were more investors and more people involved, they kind of wanted to have their own say in how the show would go. And so as a writer and an artist, how do you stay true to what you want your show to do while also not appeasing necessarily, but also hearing out the people who are helping fund your project?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, it is, they call it show business and they should call it business of show or whatever the saying is, because it's true. If you want to go make whatever you want, you can do that for free, you know, but once you start taking other people's money, you do have to sort of listen to some of the things that they have to say, particularly when it comes to legal stuff, which was more of the case of the question with ABC, the mentions of the election and stuff like that. They just wanted to run it by legal. You know, that was the thing. But for me, what I have done I have sought out spaces that gives me the most amount of freedom. Like ABC Digital, to be honest, ABC, I have to commend them. They really got behind an authentic voice. I mean, so many people watch the show and like, I cannot believe that they let you say some of the things that you say in the show. So I've sought out those spaces. Amazon was also very good. I shot a pilot called The Climb for them last year, and they really, I was saying the other day, there was a scene where a guy like was inserting his finger in a woman, and the only note they had was like, does he have to lick his fingers before? Like they were very like liberal with what I thought the scene should be.
What was your response?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I mean, if you've ever been there.
Thank you. I wanted the response to be one of just practicality. Like, yeah.
That bugs me so much when I watch shows, and I'm just like, what? Who has sex? How did they get over? What? Aren't they? Didn't that hurt? What happened? Okay. But so you know, if I had aspirations to do something like on NBC at 8:00, then I'd have to take a lot more notes. But for me, I've just sort of sought out those spaces that are looking for real, authentic voices. And I'm sure as my career goes along, there'll be a little of both, you know, because I do have a network comedy in me. It's just not what I'm doing right this second.
And you're in the midst of doing working on a feature as well, you said, right? You're writing a feature?
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
That is, do you find that writing something like that harder than writing a pilot?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's way more pages. It's way more rope.
It's so interesting when a writer says more pages, especially in regards to something like, I mean, I guess in a book it would be the same thing, but more pages also means more kind of mapping and diagramming. It doesn't necessarily mean like just more writing to fill the pages. It means like figuring more shit out so that it all has a setup and a payoff, which is a lot in 90 to 120 pages.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about structure. And we have been talking about these half hours that sometimes feel like short films, and something can meander for like 30 minutes. And you're like, oh, that was a vibe. That felt good. But something can't meander for 90 minutes. It's just not good.
Things have to happen.
Yeah.
And if you have 90 pages of things happening, well, that's a lot of stuff. I was watching a movie recently. I mean, I watch movies all the time, but a movie I watched recently that was like 120 minutes. It was like, so much happened in this movie.
What movie?
It was called Hold the Dark. It hasn't come out yet.
Oh, okay.
But it was like it was kind of a thriller. And it was just by the end of the movie, I was like, so much there was so much story in that movie, which is actually like an incredibly hard thing to do. That's a lot of ideas.
Yeah, I think that's why so many great films come from books, because you're even cutting out material to make it work in a feature. But yes, shit has to happen.
Yeah. A lot of ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I got to let you go. Congratulations on American KoKo.
Thank
I love
you
the
so
show.
much.
People can stream it on ABC anytime, right?
Yes.
You are in The Last OG as well.
Yes, we're shooting it right now.
Which is on TBS, right?
Yeah.
A wonderful show with Tracy Morgan. And thank you so much for being here. Diarra
Thanks so much
Kilpatrick,
for
everybody.
having
Give her a round of
me.
applause.